She undoubtedly manipulated him and used and exploited his weaknesses.
He isn't guessing. He was told. And what he was told is a great deal worse than manipulation.
Helped by others on the inside, that she really thought she, rather than Kate, should be the next queen after Charles. She couldn't understand why she, better looking and, in her view, more intelligent and harder working and everything, should be the queen.
She wanted the crown. The palace knew. They warned the queen.
Kate could see quite immediately that Meghan was furious that they were living in a small house in Kensington Palace compared to the sumptuous.
Meghan's comeback appeared to have everything it needed: attention, curiosity, powerful connections, and an audience still watching. But according to the explosive narrative surrounding Tom Bower's latest intervention, one problem had never disappeared. And if he was right, no new launch could simply bury it. For a moment, the path seemed almost perfectly prepared. Every announcement could ignite headlines. Every appearance could trigger debate. Every new project could be read as evidence that Meghan was preparing to reclaim a level of influence she once held with remarkable ease. She did not need to fight for attention. Attention still followed her. The more difficult battle was what that attention now meant. That was where the optimism began to fracture. Visibility had never truly been Meghan's problem. Even after stepping away from royal duties, her name remained powerful enough to dominate conversations far beyond Britain. But fame alone was no longer the prize. The real test was whether constant interest could still become authority, admiration, and lasting cultural weight. That distinction changed everything. Then came Tom Bower, entering the story not as another background critic, but as the voice threatening to expose the weakness beneath the comeback. His argument, at least in this dramatic telling, was dangerous because it did not depend on Hollywood rivals, palace resistance, money, or hostile headlines. Those obstacles could be confronted. They could be answered. They could even be turned into publicity. This problem was harder. Meghan could launch a brand, announce a production, build partnerships, or command global coverage within hours. But none of those achievements automatically restored the one thing that once made her position extraordinary: fascination without an immediate cloud of suspicion hanging over every move. Now, each new beginning arrived carrying the weight of older arguments. That created the question at the heart of the comeback. How do you convince an audience that you have changed when every attempt to show change reminds them of the controversies they have not forgotten? And that is why Bower's supposed warning forces the story backward before it can move forward. To understand the weakness, you have to return to the moment Meghan's royal exit changed her identity forever. The institution she left behind may still be the very source of symbolism that makes every attempted return so compelling. And that contradiction leads directly to the uncomfortable question Bower's argument cannot avoid. Can Meghan truly rebuild her influence without relying on the royal story she has spent years trying to move beyond? The royal connection once made Meghan one of the most watched women in the world. Now, in this dramatized account, that same connection becomes a dangerous double-edged sword. Use it too heavily, and critics accuse her of exploiting the monarchy. Ignore it completely, and something extraordinary disappears. That is the trap waiting beneath every attempt to begin again. Meghan may have stepped away from royal duties, but she did not step away from royal meaning. Through Harry, through history, through titles, through family relationships, and through the memories attached to those turbulent years, the monarchy remains woven into the way the public understands her. Independence changed her role. It did not erase the association. For an ordinary celebrity, reinvention can be almost total. A new project, a different image, a fresh audience, and the past can slowly fade. Meghan does not have that luxury. Whatever she launches is measured against the chapter that transformed her into a global figure in the first place. Even when royal status is never mentioned, the symbolism follows. An interview becomes a question about the palace. A public appearance invites comparisons. A business move can suddenly become a debate about relevance, titles, privilege, or distance from the institution she left. And every move creates two completely different stories. Supporters may see a woman building an independent life after enormous pressure, choosing resilience over retreat. Critics may see the same move as an attempt to preserve royal-level attention without carrying royal responsibilities. The action has not changed. The interpretation has. Harry makes that tension even harder to escape. His presence strengthens the connection Meghan can never fully separate from, because almost every major moment can become linked to speculation about Charles, William, Catherine, reconciliation, exclusion, or another family rupture. That creates an emotional impossibility. Move closer to reconciliation, and some may question whether the break ever meant what it seemed to mean. Stay combative, and audiences exhausted by years of conflict may simply stop caring. This is where Bauer's supposed warning becomes more serious. The real challenge is not generating coverage. Meghan has already proved she can do that. The challenge is giving people a new reason to care that does not depend on palace tension. Because escaping the royal narrative requires more than another launch. It requires replacing the story that made the world watch in the first place. But replacing an old story is only possible when people believe the new one. And that is where the comeback encounters the problem Bauer supposedly sees as far more dangerous than palace politics. A logo can change, a company can change, a television project can change, even an entire public strategy can be redesigned overnight. But perception moves differently. Once an audience begins questioning motives, every new move can be interpreted through the suspicion created by everything that happened before it. And this is where Bauer's supposed argument becomes most damaging. In this speculative storyline, the greatest obstacle to Meghan's comeback is not exposure, access, or opportunity. It is credibility. More specifically, whether enough people are willing to trust the version of Meghan now being presented to them. That does not mean everyone doubts her. Far from it. Meghan still has passionate supporters who see independence, resilience, and determination. But the audience is sharply divided before a new project even begins. That means almost nothing arrives neutrally. A launch becomes evidence for one side and ammunition for the other. Each reinvention, therefore, carries less surprise than the one before it. A fresh chapter is announced. Expectations rise. The language suggests renewal, yet almost immediately the conversation slides back toward old royal disputes, past interviews, broken relationships, and questions that were never fully settled. And that reveals the difference between attention and trust. Controversy can generate headlines, searches, reaction videos, arguments, and enormous numbers. But attention created by conflict does not automatically become loyalty. People may watch closely without believing deeply. They may follow every move without becoming emotionally invested in the new direction. That leaves Meghan in a brutal authenticity trap. If every detail is polished, critics can call the comeback calculated. If it appears more spontaneous, one careless remark can create another controversy powerful enough to overwhelm the project itself. Then there is what might be called narrative debt. Every unresolved contradiction from the past becomes part of the burden carried into the future. Old statements, changing alliances, previous projects, and public expectations do not simply disappear because a new campaign begins. That is what makes the problem so difficult to control. Meghan can choose the collaborators. She can shape the message. She can decide the timing, the branding, the language, and the presentation. But she cannot choose what the audience remembers. And repairing that gap takes something modern celebrity culture rarely rewards: patience. Trust grows slowly, through repetition and consistency, while the media machine demands something new, dramatic, and immediate. That leaves Meghan facing a brutal choice: slow everything down long enough to rebuild confidence, or keep generating the attention required to prove the comeback is happening at all. Every comeback needs a clean opening chapter. Meghan's problem in this dramatized narrative is that the public keeps flipping back to earlier pages. A new venture becomes a royal debate. A glamorous appearance becomes a family comparison. And suddenly, the future is being judged by the past again. That is what makes reinvention so complicated. Meghan has already occupied too many powerful identities for any new one to arrive without baggage. Actress, duchess, working royal, royal outsider, media personality, entrepreneur, producer, public advocate. Each chapter attracted a different audience, and each audience expected something different from her. So the question becomes uncomfortable. Come back to what? Is she returning to entertainment? Building a lifestyle empire? Positioning herself as a global campaigner? Remaining a royal-adjacent celebrity with unique access to one of the most famous families on Earth? Or trying to become something entirely separate from all of it? At first, that uncertainty creates curiosity. People watch because they want to know what comes next. But over time, mystery can become confusion. Without one clear destination, every new project risks looking less like part of a larger plan and more like another attempt to discover which version of Meghan can still command the strongest response. And that is where ambition begins colliding with exhaustion. Meghan may want the freedom to explore several worlds at once, yet the public increasingly demands something simpler: a clear identity, a clear purpose, and a reason to believe this chapter will last longer than the previous one. The expectations make that harder. Her name creates huge headlines before results even arrive. That means ordinary success can suddenly look disappointing because observers expected something historic. A business is not merely judged as a business. A show is not simply judged as a show. A public appearance becomes a test of relevance. Every launch becomes a referendum on whether Meghan still possesses the cultural power she once seemed to hold automatically. And even if she finds the perfect direction, another problem is waiting. Meghan is not rebuilding her image in an empty space. The royal family continues producing its own milestones, relationships, ceremonies, and symbols of stability, creating a parallel story that never stops moving. That means every attempt to define her future is quietly competing with the institution that defined her past. And as Meghan tries to define her next chapter, the institution she once stood inside is creating new images, new alliances, and new symbols of continuity without needing her participation. The most damaging palace response may not be a statement, briefing, or public confrontation at all. In this dramatized power struggle, silence becomes far more effective. The monarchy does not need to answer every headline. It simply continues producing ceremonies, anniversaries, family moments, and images of continuity. That is the deeper problem Meghan now faces. The palace does not have to win every argument. It does not even have to enter them. While celebrity culture moves through launches, reactions, controversies, and reinventions at breathtaking speed, monarchy operates on a completely different clock. Scandals can dominate for days, headlines can burn for weeks, but the institution survives through succession, ritual, tradition, and the quiet repetition of duty. That difference creates an enormous imbalance. Meghan must keep producing something new if she wants to remain culturally central. A project, an announcement, a partnership, a major appearance. The monarchy, by contrast, can draw meaning from ceremonies and traditions that existed long before any modern controversy began. It does not need reinvention in the same way. Its power comes partly from endurance. William and Catherine represent that continuity. In this dramatic narrative, their public relevance does not depend on answering Meghan or Harry. Their story keeps moving whether the Sussex controversy is loud or silent. Charles faces an even more complicated position. He is not merely a father caught inside a family dispute. He is also monarch, which means private emotions can become tangled with public duty, institutional stability, and the symbolism of the crown. That is why distance can become more powerful than confrontation. If the palace refuses to provide a dramatic enemy, one of the most combustible forces driving the story begins to weaken. There is no fresh battle to react to, no explosive exchange to dominate the cycle, no obvious opponent around whom the comeback can be framed. Harry then becomes caught inside another painful contradiction. Reconciliation might calm hostility and restore damaged family ties, but genuine peace could also remove the tension that has kept the Sussex versus Palace story so compelling for so long. And that changes the stakes completely. If conflict can no longer carry the narrative, Meghan needs something far harder to manufacture, an achievement strong enough to stand alone, without royal comparisons, palace tension, or another family rupture giving it oxygen. And that raises the question on which the entire comeback may ultimately stand or fall. Can Meghan create something powerful enough that her royal past becomes background rather than the headline? There is one way out of the trap, not another interview, not another palace revelation, not another argument over titles, invitations, or family loyalties. Meghan would need something much harder, undeniable success that belongs entirely to her, powerful enough to force even her fiercest critics to discuss the achievement first. That is the escape route hiding beneath all the noise. If credibility is the real weakness, then the answer cannot simply be louder publicity. It has to be sustained success with clear results, built far enough away from royal conflict that the achievement becomes the story on its own. And that means more than one viral moment. A powerful appearance can dominate a weekend. A carefully timed announcement can control headlines for days, but a lasting business, production, campaign, or brand can begin changing identity itself. If audiences repeatedly associate Meghan with something that works, something that grows, and something that does not require another palace controversy to remain interesting, the old narrative could finally begin losing its grip. But that kind of victory demands patience. There can be no constant resetting, no endless search for the next dramatic beginning. The breakthrough would have to come through consistency. The same message, the same direction, repeated results, and enough time for public perception to catch up. That is difficult in a media environment that rewards instant reaction. And the temptation to react would be everywhere. Every criticism could invite an answer. Every accusation could feel unfair enough to challenge. But each response risks dragging the conversation backward, away from the new project and straight into the familiar royal feud. Sometimes the strongest move would be silence. Sometimes discipline would matter more than defense. If that strategy worked, palace comparisons would not vanish overnight. But they might stop defining everything. Meghan could slowly become known for what she is building rather than what she left behind. Yet even success carries a hidden danger. Expectations around her are so enormous that ordinary achievement can be treated as disappointment. What might look impressive for someone else can be described as insufficient, simply because Meghan's name creates expectations of something spectacular. And that pressure does not fall on her alone. Advisors, collaborators, business partners, and Harry all become part of the same delicate calculation. One person can strengthen the direction. Another can accidentally reopen the past, because behind every public reinvention sits a private circle deciding what to announce, what to ignore, and which battles are worth fighting. And one wrong decision can reopen everything Meghan is trying to leave behind. Harry may be Meghan's greatest source of support, but he is also the living connection to the institution her comeback must eventually stop depending upon. That creates a painful contradiction. The closer he moves toward his family, the more complicated Meghan's position becomes. The further away he stays, another controversy survives. That makes Harry far more than a supporting figure in Meghan's reinvention. His choices can change the meaning of almost everything around her. A private decision about family can suddenly become a public question about loyalty, strategy, resentment, or reconciliation. If Harry begins rebuilding relationships with Charles or William, speculation would erupt immediately. Is Meghan included? Is she supportive? Has she been left outside the conversation? Is the distance deliberate? Even silence could become evidence for whatever story people already want to believe. But if reconciliation never happens, the opposite danger grows stronger. The family conflict remains alive, and every new Sussex project risks being dragged back into the same royal argument Meghan is supposedly trying to move beyond. That puts Harry inside an emotional struggle with no easy answer. He may want to defend his wife, protect his children, preserve the independent life they created, and still recover pieces of the family connection that shaped him long before any public rupture. Those desires do not fit neatly together. Meghan faces her own impossible test. Support reconciliation too openly, and critics may call it opportunistic. Resist it, and others may accuse her of standing in Harry's way. Say nothing, and the silence becomes a blank space outsiders fill with their own motives. This is where Bauer's supposed credibility argument becomes even more dangerous. When an audience is already divided, the same gesture can produce opposite conclusions. Warmth looks strategic to one side, distance looks defensive to another. The strongest strategy may therefore be the hardest: refuse to make reconciliation part of the comeback at all. Let whatever happens between Harry and his family remain separate from Meghan's public identity. But that choice carries a price. Less royal drama means fewer explosive headlines, fewer instant reactions, and perhaps a slower return to cultural influence. Because the final test is no longer whether Meghan can dominate another news cycle, she has already proved she can. The real test is whether she can resist the very controversy that guarantees everyone keeps watching. After all the headlines, royal tension, reinventions, interviews, launches, and whispered comeback plans, the supposed revelation becomes brutally simple. Meghan's greatest obstacle is not getting people to notice her. Millions already do. Her challenge is changing what they believe they are seeing when they look at her. That is where the entire story finally comes together. Visibility was never the real problem. Meghan can still command enormous attention. The harder task is converting that attention into trust, and then turning trust into something far more valuable, lasting influence that does not collapse the moment another royal controversy takes over. And there is no shortcut. One interview cannot repair years of division. One endorsement cannot erase suspicion. One reconciliation cannot redefine an entire public identity. Even the most carefully managed launch can only begin the process. If the audience feels another reset is being forced too quickly, the comeback itself risks becoming part of the problem. That makes impatience dangerous. One future is obvious. Meghan continues making moves that remain connected to palace drama, royal speculation, and family tension. The headlines stay enormous. The reaction never stops. But the very attention keeping her culturally visible also prevents her from becoming fully separate from the story she left behind. The other path is quieter, slower, much less dramatic. It would demand consistency, independent success, fewer responses to critics, and the discipline to allow some controversies to pass unanswered. That path may ultimately offer more, but emotionally it could be much harder. The dramatic route guarantees people will talk. The disciplined route requires accepting moments when they may not. This is why Bauer's supposed revelation matters in this dramatized narrative. It does not prove Meghan is destined to fail. It identifies the battlefield she cannot conquer with one announcement or one perfectly timed appearance, public perception. Her comeback, then, is still unresolved. The decision ahead is not simply what project comes next. It is what kind of story Meghan wants that project to belong to, another explosive chapter tied to the monarchy, or the beginning of something patient enough to survive without it. And if Meghan's next move finally succeeds without needing a royal feud, a palace controversy, or another dramatic confrontation, that may be the moment everyone realizes the comeback was never about returning to the old Meghan at all. It was about proving she could become someone the public had not yet decided how to judge.